Hello and welcome to Workplace Shift. I'm Nicolette DeVidar. Do you know what drives your decisions? How do you select people you want to hire? How do you choose what you like? How do you form your opinion for or against something? Are you biased? Is there such a thing as unconscious bias, and is it necessarily bad or simply part of our human existence and learning experience? This is what I'll explore in this episode of Workplace Shift with my guest, an unconscious bias specialist and trainer.
Thanks, Nicolette. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. So unconscious bias is obviously a big topic. So let's start right with the basics here. Bias. Why is bias these days so important? Why are we talking about it so much?
Well, I think it's good actually to start with the definition of what is bias.
Yep. Go ahead.
I think it's important to start with the definition of what is bias. What is bias? How is it unconscious? And they're basically social stereotypes about certain groups of people that individuals from outside form their own conscious awareness. So it's also the bottom line stereotypes that people create without even realizing it. So the thing about it is that all biases aren't actually negative. Say, for example, what you decided to wear today, what I decided to wear today, that's not necessarily a negative bias, but some of the negative biases actually come as a result of wrong information, misinformation. Not all the information is shared. Sometimes as executives and leaders, we know certain things that the people who report to us don't know. And so as a result of that, those folks may experience some bias because they don't understand the full picture.
Yeah.
And then one bias could be actually in hiring practices. So some people like to hire folks who are just like them or who have certain types of experience, or they're excited, or they're like me, say the hiring manager. But the problem with that is that if someone is experienced, say, for example, they've got 10 years in an industry, that doesn't necessarily mean that they've been 10 great years. That just might mean that they know how to manipulate the system in order to stay hired and not fired.
I'm going to challenge you a little bit on this one because bias has been talked about so much and very often in a negative sense. So I think it's important for us to understand, when does bias affect something and really you need to step away from it and kind of look objectively at a situation, or when is it just something that's just part of your personal standards?
Well, in business, a time to realize that you may need to check out some of your biases is when you're not producing. Every bit of bias is negative. For example, what did you decide to wear today? What did I decide to wear today? Did I wear pearls or did I wear some other type of jewelry? That's not a negative bias. But the type of bias that you got to really think about is, how is it affecting our bottom line? I mean, we all go to work in order to achieve goals and to provide a wonderful product and a service. But if, as a result of our workplace, if we're shifting around in our workplace and our mindset is not one of a unified one as a result of a lot of bias, then we're just not going to reach our goals and probably not do well as an organization. So some people, for example, they only want to hire people who went to their school and university.
Yeah.
So the challenge with that, Nicolette, is, say, for example, they all are in have the same major. So what happens? More than likely, they've had the same instructors, the same dean, the same school of thought, the same. It becomes this homogeneous way of looking at life, and there's no diversity there. And so that's a big problem. So some people's bias is, I've got to only hire for my alma mater. Well, you kind of should mix it up a little bit, because if you're only hiring people from that school of thought, then that's really that's coming into your organization. So there's no innovation there. So that's a word, of course, it's another buzzword. So the innovation doesn't come with everything being the same. It's good to mix it up a little bit.
Yes, and particularly as we get organizations ready for the 21st century, we all know that organizations need to basically hire people that are the total opposite of what they used to hire previously. So they bring in new skill sets, new mindsets, fresh way of thinking, etc. Do you have a method that you normally work with organizations in how they can bypass falling into that trap?
Culture of an organization, as well as any bias that the organization has as a result of the culture they've created. And in addition to that, any bias that the executive and the leadership team have, and the board of directors or board of trustees or board of governors, board of regents, it can really trickle down. It's amazing how it all works. So it's a good.
I think the culture part is the most difficult one, because when you try to instill a different culture, for example, and you want to break down the pattern, from my experience, the issue is that because hiring managers like to hire the same type of people, as you say, like something that triggers, the same background, the same school, the same successes or failures and things like that. I think it's really difficult to kind of dive down and break that pattern, which is why, in my case, for example, from my experience, I have asked organizations not to make hiring decisions based on resumes. So you take this right out. And we've had the experience in all of the organizations that I've worked with, for example, when you present a candidate and you just say the story of a candidate, particularly to a large group of individuals, there is more consensus on how this person generally resonates with the organization and everybody than if you have people look through the resume and they kind of start picking their favorites, or when their bias really kicks in. Based on your experience as the unconscious bias trainer, how do you influence hiring managers to branch out and in fact hire the opposite of what they would normally go for? Are you